Is anyone here at Digital Construction? I know you were there, Steve. Is anyone else here at Digital Construction Week? Because I think if you were there, we all kind of like sat down at tables and probably missed each other because it was sort of in and out in the end. Was anyone else there on the day? Someone's obviously saying, yeah.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
I was there
Perfect.
peacefully.
It's my screen out now. I can see it. That's good. So hopefully you got something out of it as well, because I did a little presentation which I'll bring up after we've gone through this, actually, just to give you a bit of train of thought where some of the other stuff's kind of heading. If you go to the next slide, Jess. Again, it was how do we prevent incorrect design, selection, installation of fire safety products. If you go to the next slide again, Jess, as well, because I'm just trying to work with the order you had these in. That's it. You see how different tables. Obviously, well, there's Paul White's one there. Have you got the table? The table. Davey's got them here, actually, all the different tables.
Yeah, he's got a picture of each table as he comes to the question.
Yeah, I didn't know if he had. Okay, that was. Thank you, Richard. Just refreshing me. Sorry, mate. I'm head down.
No, not at all. Just to be clear, basically, it was over much discussion with and the pre-DCW meetings. Everything was distilled down to 4 questions.
That was it.
And each table answered a question. But also there was a lot of input prior to that, and we had a sort of like a survey thing online that people were filling out. So that has all been distilled into this document. So this is table answering the first question. They're the people who were doing it, and then sorry, Paul, carry on.
No, that's all good. It's all good. It's all good because George went through it the other day. Obviously, George's not here today anyway, so it's fine. So that was that table. Go to the next one for us as well, just so we can refresh ourselves. This was the output from that table, if I'm correct as well, Jess. Yeah.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Can I just ask what the 4 questions were?
That's
Richard
I can't remember. That's why I was trying to see if you had them on one page because I didn't catch the beginning.
Oh, okay. No, you're gonna go. If you're gonna go through them, it's fine. Yeah.
That's
cool. It goes through it all. It's just one at a time.
Yes, the first question was how do we prevent it? And this was the output from those questions there. So how do we prevent incorrect design, installation, the rest of it? The output from that table was competent individuals should be trained for their specific roles to ensure efficient planning, delivery, design, maintenance work. Excuse me, let's get rid of that. Maintenance personnel should also be involved in the planning process to handle unforeseen events. The right people with necessary competencies should be involved at the right time throughout the integrated part of the programme, procurement and construction. Strong quality assurance process, contractual agreements should be balanced cost and quality, supported by robust emergency response plans. It's always interesting when you get at the table what sort of viewpoints that you get. A regulator should prevent companies from using uncertified products by providing clear guidance on compatible options. Hold that thought because that's going to be an interesting one. I'll have a bit more of a discussion on that in a minute. Thorough risk assessment, seeking advice from professionals, ensuring trained staff following codes of practice are essential for selection and installing fire safety products. So there's a bit more about competency there as well. Key measures for the fire safety include employing competent designers, consultative experts, authorities using qualified contractors, implementing quality assurance and asset management tools. Now, when you go back to the beginning of that answer that question, if you go back 2 slides again for me, Jess, on this, right? Oh, it's more here. Just go back to the beginning. Oh, bloody hell, they've got like 22 outputs. God. Go back to the beginning. Yeah, it's Jesus, a lot there. Go back to the beginning slides, if you can. That's that one there. How do we prevent incorrect design, selection, installation of fire safety products? One of the things really with this is that do we think, as a construction group, that the designers, as in the architects, the building services engineer, the fire engineers, actually understand the fire safety properties of products in the first instance? That's the question.
Not all of them by any chance, without a fire engineer supporting them.
Well, even the fire engineers, Stephen, do you think they understand all the product classifications, the 54 items for a smoke control system they need to classify for products? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a bit of an interesting dynamics. If you crack on a bit as well, go forward again, Giz, we'll look at the other questions that are there. How do we ensure continuity relationship of asset information throughout the asset lifetime? So I think the question is looking at the first one is that do we actually probably understand all the asset information for each product? Because I think when you look at it, you sort of see that, you know, things like 8644 was talking about REI, and you go, well, that's structure. What about walls is EI? What about dampers? It's EIV, HO, C10000, ESI maybe. So there's all different information that goes with those assets. So if you go onto the group for this one here quickly for me, Jess, and you go, assets should be early into the common data environment asset management tool, linking data request information to assets using unique identifier. Understand the information needs of the end user. Implement the golden thread principles, ensuring suitable business systems, process, and clarifying ownership and responsibility around AI. And you sort of go, well, yeah, you know, my biggest thing is that if you look at the golden thread for any selection of piece of equipment, it's building risk, space risk, how it's supposed to operate, how it's classified, what wall it goes in, and how you install it before you even get to the quality, you know, the quality insurance of the installation part of it. So if all those bits aren't you know, sort of available in BIM, this is the point we were making on the day and at the last meeting with George, and George was going through it as well, is that all the information that you need for, you know, doing golden threading BIM doesn't kind of exist in template yeah, anyways, it's all not all kind of there. There's only certain smaller bits that are available, if that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, it's project information requirements need to be set up, and they need to link with exchange information requirements that go into what you've said here, the asset.
I think
three things together there.
Yeah, I think just to answer Claire's question, I think Richard, this has gone in the black box, isn't it? Now I think George would have put it in there. If he hasn't put it in there, I'm sure it will go in the black box.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it will do. But what I'm trying to do with this is do a bit of like a cheers, Claire, bit of arbitration around actually when you look at it and you say the questions that are asked and people's viewpoints, is that because these subjects are actually quite complicated, you know, to understand, you know, like you've probably heard me say it before, is that fire stopping a pipe work bears no relationship to fire stopping, you know, with dampers or smoke control systems, because they're just not the same thing. You know, what one is going through multiple rooms and is carrying wastewater or domestic water or whatever it's carrying, chilled and heating, and you've got joint and material or insulation types, and one is a device in a wall like a damper where the ducts break off of it. It's not apples for apples, if that makes sense. So there's always different things that are involved. So you've got one here: increase company control over installations, improve inspections, audit of subcontractors, avoid price-based contracts for, say, fire doors, create a centralised system for accessibility to relevant staff, assign responsibility for data management, conduct regular reviews to keep the information up to date. And I think all this stuff is relevant, you know, 100% relevant. So when you go back to the original questions, I'm not going to read them all out because we'll be here till Christmas. If you go back to the original question for this one here again, and you go, how do we ensure continued relationship with asset information throughout the asset lifecycle? My question is always to everyone is that, do we understand all the key asset information for the product at the moment? And I think the answer is we probably don't. We only know an E rating and I rating possibly. We don't know all the other characteristics of those products fully yet as an industry. We're not there. Fire engineers aren't there because they don't deal with product standards, do they? They deal with risk and space and hose lengths and the rest of it. No, not taking anything away from them, but product standards are quite complicated. Architects don't understand pipe work, do they? Just be fair, it's not something they get trained on. Materiality of pipe work and jointing methods and how you insulate it. So if you don't understand that, you can't really pick a system for seals on a wall. And you've got building services engineers, no disrespect to them as well, they're not always in control of the type of material that gets used either, and actually the extent of that system, because sometimes it's under CDP around some of the complicated subjects like smoke control and certain aspects like fire dampers.
One thing that seems to be something that sorry to interrupt, something that has been consistent throughout is at every level getting experts or specialists involved a stage earlier.
No, it does.
It seems to be for everybody's answers on the table and beforehand. At each stage, get people the people from the next stage involved in the stage earlier. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that you know, I was talking with George at the last meeting, was that if you take any example, right, because some other things I'll show you at the end, and we brought some of this stuff up on the day we sort of presented it. But if you take, and I use a fire door because it's an example most people relate to, is that before you consider the part B element of the door, which is the risk either side of it, because one side could be protected and the other side might not be a protected space, which means you've got low leakage for S ratings and things at resistance periods that are required. I hate using the word rating. You've actually got to think, what is the door there to do? Does this make sense? Is it there for security? Or is it there as a compartment door? Or is its function of security and fire secondary? And actually, is there any requirement for it to have pull forces on it? Is there something you need to do for DDA? Because if you're going to buy a door and you've got all these other componentry to go in it, like security, could be shear locks, mag locks, you know, mortise thread locks, whatever you're putting into it, and you've got power devices, you're not going to get the part B right if those bits aren't right in the first instance, if that makes sense. And the same kind of conundrum exists with things like fire dampers, is that if you've got protected spaces, you've got low leakage requirements, you've got motorized fire dampers, not just general fire dampers with a curtain on them. And these things can have an effect because it's about airflow volumes through and get restricted by opposed blades, sort of MFDs, where if it's a fully open curtain damper, you've got full airflow. This is one of the big things we were kind of talking about on our sort of table of the day as well, is that when you look at all this asset information through the asset's lifetime, the first thing is actually, what is it there to do? Because the fire seal around a pipe, or even the seal and the resistance period of the door, is a function of that product to do another function in its space, if that makes sense. Just looking at it slightly differently. If you get that bit wrong, you get the other bit wrong as well. If you go back to the answers to this quickly, just and I'll move on to the next one. So what else we've got? We've got ensure digital records start at the design stage. We'll agree with that. But again, if you're going to start with the design stage, I think we've got to make sure we know what it is we're recording at design stage, the function of the product, how it's supposed to operate. Then the stuff around, you know, support and construction, actually the fire side of it, allowing continuous monitoring, comparison of the past and current inspections and modifications. Totally agree. Provide a digital platform for uploading and tracking asset information throughout its life cycle, including inspections and maintenance. And I think if you look at all this stuff around digital records, it's no good. I've taught this internally today, Fan, is that it's no good taking a picture of something on site and going, that door's installed perfectly as it's been specified, and the rest of it is actually it's been specified incorrectly, or everything else, and it's actually the wrong function for the space risk that it's doing, because all you've done is recorded a perfectly good door in the wrong location, if that makes sense. If you go on to the next question just for us. You can all read. We'll get this. This hasn't been sent out, Richard. We'll send it out because there's loads of things here to read through, and I don't think
we're making it up into a report, Paul.
Yeah.
So we'll get
that's
that
good.
out. So obviously not a presentation. Make it up into a report and get it out to everybody. And as you say, it'll be on black box.
That's good. We've got all the if you haven't seen them, we've got the individual product workshops coming up as well. How do we ensure the building safety data is live and not an outdated snapshot in time? So if you go onto the table quickly, see who's on that table, just to refresh my brain. Okay, so you've got Candle on there as well, and Scott Browrigg. So Animatic's great anyway if we don't know it, Anna. If you go to the next page, let's look at some of the output from it. A robust change management process should be followed throughout the entire project. And change management, and I mean, I'll be frank with it, is that forgetting Fire Safety Act and change management, general change management on jobs isn't necessarily done very well anyway, because when you look at changing of you know, componentry around adequate for the function it's supposed to be working against, you can sometimes find that the dreaded word of VE comes in change management for going from, you know, A to B, but actually the A was never right in the first place, if that makes sense. So you end up with a B, which is hopefully you go to a B that's right, but you don't. You end up going to the thing that's wrong anyway, completely wrong more than the first one. So change management process needs to be robust. It needs to have the right level of competency and input to get it right. Design a comprehensive soft landing approach. Love the word soft landing, including defining information scope, ownership and process for update and managing the information. And I think if you looked at soft landings in relation to energy, it's about how you think the energy was going to be when you purchased the building. So how many kilowatt hours you're doing per metre squared, and the reality after is managing that difference between the two. Because it's a combination of how you occupy the building. This one here, it's got to be actually how you portray the information for the function it's supposed to have been performing, to actually then what you're going to do going forward to maintain it, and actually understanding that, you know, and I'll show you some of the slides we had on the day as well from the process side of things, is actually can you get in, you know, from soft landing's point of view, to actually maintain things like the product seals and the product kit, like cleaning for access on dampers, or maybe getting in risers to check mechanisms on doors. You know, actually, can you get in the riser? They actually put a door in to get inside, you know, the plant risers running up the building, so you can check all the fire seals every year, that kind of thing. Improved assessments by implementing the site enforcement, utilising technology like sensors, creating an online portal for easy access. Regularly inspects assets through, you know, through contractors or on-site caretakers, utilise technology like sensors, identify and reports issues. Not too sure how that kind of works, but I'll get the train of thought. And so look down the bottom here, you've got ensure skilled resources are available to manage both physical and digital assets. That's probably an interesting point of view, because you don't know the products. It's very hard to understand actually you've got the right asset information in the first place. So adequately manage buildings with technical professionals and ensure continuity of knowledge. Yeah, again, nothing around competency. Conduct regular audits to ensure compliance. So I'm not going to read them all out, but you can kind of get the gist of the output from that table. If you go to the next question for me, Jess, because there's loads of these here. If you go to the next one for me, how do we ensure that the incomplete building services? Okay. Does this, design does not impact construction? I can't get it. Is that actually written right? How do we ensure that the incomplete building services? Okay, design does not influence. Okay, so this is table I was on anyway. This doesn't read
building
right, does
services design. It's building
Yeah.
services design, not.
Yeah. Okay, so if you go to the outputs in this, we had design of a building should be complete before construction to avoid mistakes and, you know, uninformed decision. I think that's pretty. I think we'd all probably agree with that one. Design changes should be minimal to prevent budget overspends. Okay, rethinking procurement process can help ensure a smoother transition from design to construction. That's what you said earlier, Richard. Everyone says the same thing. You need that specialist help early on in the process, which is no different to what's in the David Mosley report on procurement. Utilising 3D modelling, conducting gap analysis, detailed construction planning, engaging stakeholders timely can enhance the construction process. Again, you know, 3D modeling can, but the risk is with 3D modeling is that you've got to model the actual functionality of the whole product, all the seals that go with it on the wall, you know, and how the wall works to get it right. Clash detection 3D modeling isn't as simple as the pipes touching the wall, etc. There's a bit more to it. Fire safety regulations should be simplified and standardised to improve the understanding, prevent confusion on construction sites. That I totally agree with. Because when you look at, and I'll show some of the slides in a minute, is that when you look at how complicated it is to get one damper or one door in one wall, it's not a 5 minute process. Key steps to prevent design issues from impacting construction include identifying missing information, which is a big thing. Do we have all the information for the assets, as I said earlier? Regular communication, site inspections, maintaining detailed records. So that construction should be halted until design issues are resolved, and involving competent professionals and industry experts can enhance issue resolution. What else is it? It's got a good one in here. You've got procurement issues are significant risks that need to be addressed in the construction industry. I think, again, same thing around procurement, necessary tools and resources. Going to the next page, we just see there's anything else that's been written on there. I don't think there is. Oh, there's a few more ones. Lack of coordination between building and M&E design can lead to compromise and potential dangers. And that's probably the big one, because all the products in one wall, the wall must be, you know, correct to house all of those products as a system, not just, you know, you put a wall in, you've got to make the products work with it, because that will just never happens, unfortunately. And information, someone mentioned on the dashboard, information flow is critical. Well, do we pass information between the relative people at the right time to actually understand, you know, the decisions that need to be made in like a racy format to get to the right decision that you require, because there's different knowledge holders. Again, the complexity of our information is often underestimated. That's the point. I think it's one of the points I made on the day, is that when you look at the information that's required for one door in one location, it isn't just FD 30, FD 60, wherever it is. It's a bit more than that. As you know, because you know, people hear from doors, but it's a bit more complicated because the function, the security, and the DDA requirements as well. So, you know, there's a tendency to overvalue the market at later stages of the project process, undervaluing the importance of information and products at the early stages. And that I think is a brilliant point as well. Has anyone else got any questions on these before I move on? Everyone got any viewpoints? Silence. What I'm going to do is just, I want to take the screen quickly. I just want to share one of the things we did on the day as well, just to bring it back into where we were. That's the wrong screen. I'm going to share the other one. Hold on. Let's share it very quickly. One of the things we shared on the day was this. Has anyone seen this before?
I've not seen that before.
No? Okay. Paul, have you seen it before as well?
No, I've never seen this one before.
No. Okay, so because for those who are there, we would have seen this probably on the day as well. What we're trying to do was, I think, because the questions we asked on the day were written, the responses are really good, and I think when that report's formulated, Richard, we'll have a good chomp through all of it, because George did a diagram originally around the gateway points, which is at the top, around when should gateway 1 be, when should gateway 2 be, and when should gateway 3 be. Because when you look at how the regulator's going to kind of operate, and I think we've all got different knowledge around, you know, what the regulators are apparently doing and what their view on the gateway stages are. And you know, one of the big things is they're probably going to allow, you know, not probably going to allow, it's always been on the government site, phased approaches for handing information over, which to me is probably one of the biggest risks, because how you coordinate all these products together into a system approach is where the kind of breakdown occurs, because about, for me, it's always been about knowledge holders. And excuse my voice, my hay fever is so bad today, it's like it's just grinding in there. One of the big things George goes on about, and I've been with him all the way with this, is about building fire safety types and space risks. Because one of the things when you go through it or when you start investigating is that a storeroom in a hospital can have a different classification of space risk to a storage unit in a commercial office. And a commercial office with different stuff in the storeroom can have a different classification again to another commercial office with a storeroom. It's all about getting space risk right. And when I was speaking about it on the day, I was saying that, look, we've got to be dishonest with ourselves, that fire engineers do have a knowledge of space risk, but if the information isn't handed to them to actually identify what the content of that space risk is, you'll never see it. So what these points at the bottom are is about how you get space risk identified, how you look at the system. And I can zoom this in a little bit actually, because it's probably I'm a bit gifted with a huge monitor at this desk.
Thanks.
You probably haven't got one. Yeah, sorry, Steve. I could kind of see you like doing the wincy thing in the background, so I do
Yeah,
apologise,
Thanks
mate.
for that. No,
And
thanks.
just consider this an eye test. I'm now specsavers.com, yeah. So fire system safety operational type, static, transient, dynamic. You know, this is, we mentioned this before, is that things like doors are a sort of a transient fire protection device, because they open, they shut, they can be powered, they can have security, people walk through them, they can open both ways. So you can't look at it the same as like a fire damper on a wall, or I suppose a pipe collar, or a glass screen, because it's a completely static, you know, passive fire protection device, isn't it? It's not performing a function other than to prevent part B going through it. Does that make sense? And obviously you can see through glass, and dampers do airflow as their primary function. If that bit's wrong, the part B bit's wrong anyway, if that makes sense. So you've got to have a way of identifying how those systems operate. Smoke control's dynamic, takes smoke out of an area, takes it from multiple rooms out top of a building. Do you know what? It's not the same hooch. When you look at how you classify those products, the classification numbers are all different. doors, and a lot of doors are 476 tested still. But if it was here and the classification number bears no reference to what a damper does, a duct does, a pipe does, it's all completely different. Those numbers are completely different depending on the products that are chosen to meet the safety case of the space. That makes sense. It's not the same thing. So you have to sort of break all these products out individually. As I said at the start, fire engineers, they don't know all these products. They're all complicated in their own right. And you get into building services engineers as well. They don't really understand all of them either. No disrespect. I'm one of those fraternity, and it is immensely complicated to get your head around it, especially if you try and do flow rates and other things all day long. It's not the simplest thing in the world to get your head around. So that all ends up being CDP, same as the doors do, the dampers do, the fire resistant ducts do. You see where I'm going with this. So they're not experts, the people that supply those systems, on the safety risk of the space, because if I on a fire engineer to give the safety risk of the space, you see where I'm going with this? It's a big loop going around, and somehow you got to get to a point where you kind of nail it. So when you look at descriptive, and I always call it descriptive QA, it does involve the wall types as well, because unfortunately the wall is still a product in its own right, the same as a damper is, and it's still got to be classified to suit. That makes all the products that go through it all. So you might need some that need block work, some that need drywall, but the architect's driven drywall onto the job with a structural design, but actually you need to put a block work or a brickwork wall in. These are the things that you kind of see, but it's coming too late down the line. And to be a bit controversial, I'm not sure bringing the supply chain in fixes all of it just yet, unless you get the data in the right order, because the people that supply these kind of products don't do fire risk of space. So this is the disconnect between those 5 points, which we've got to try and bring back together. So when you look at this diagram, there was two things I was trying to represent with George at the time, was that the asset information around all of these requires templators, because it's bloody complicated, to be quite frank, and it's a bit more than 8644 with ERI. It's you've got classification on these of pressure, of resilience. If it's motorized, C10,000, you've got all the drop rods in, but everything else that goes with it, it's still got a number that goes with it for how you do, the template for how that safety information goes with these products. And it's all completely different. Then you've got to be able to install it as well, get access both sides, clean it. See where I'm going with this, right? So that is a summation of how you get the quality assurance. And if you've not done that before you go into Gateway 1, you don't know how it fits, you don't know where it, how to access it, you don't know if you've got risers that are big enough. And these are the common things. I'm sure, Paul, you'll see it on site, Wayne, there, that you'll get the site and you'll have things like steel beams across compartment lines. They've drawn everything going through the steel beams, and you go, you're going below them, mate. You ain't going through them, because it's different test standards. So it's trying to get a mechanism to drive all of this out and actually have the BIM data eventually that can support it. But I think we're a bit off yet getting those templators done, because you need sort of cross industry agreement on it. But then you look at things like digital records, that's over here, but that's a summation of all of this, isn't it? How you've if I just zoom in a bit, once you know what the product is that you're using to match that, if you go to manufacturing and you give them all the information around that, they'll go, this is the product you want to meet that. Then you've got a known installation prescriptive of how you install it. Then you've got quality parameters and workmanship that goes, you can benchmark it, you can do installation, then you can do a record of actually how it's installed against those products. That's what we were kind of talking about on the day as well, about how you get to that point. But without this, at this stage, you can't guarantee the fit works, it's the right product, the appropriate space risk has been picked up. We sort of showed it around in, like, we talk about change management process, is that if you do something that affects this once you've set it to work, then you've got to be in this world of a major change. There's no other way you can kind of look at it. If you change that classification number, that has got to be major, because the ripple effect is huge. Once you've set this around the culmination of the products, you've got to look at the ripple from every single product. So if I just display this in a different order, if you set the wall to be brick and block at 140 mil thick around all of these products that go in it, and then you go and change something, you've got to go back and reassess all of this, each one against what you've changed, because unfortunately you might find this affects the product that you've used from the other, product types in that wall type. You mainly see it from drywall to brick, not from brick the other way, to be honest with you. But doors can be a bit of a nuance, because doors have to be tested in both substrates, whereas dampers go from that to that, resistant ducts go from that to that, pipe work goes from that to that. Flues, you've got to do both. Curtains, you've got to do both. Buzz bars, you can go from that to that. So there's all different rule sets around it all. So this is the nuance of what we're kind of seeing. We showed this on the day as well. We'll make sure we get this sent out as well, because this is common knowledge. It's out there from other working groups that are going on. But it was to get a method of helping people and a common process strain to make things easier to spot about how you handle that information about risk class. What the if you look at dampers in their inherency, it's all about.
Paul, is this your document?
Yeah, well, George has got it. We displayed it on the day, mate. You can go in the black box. It's no big drama.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But the thing is, what we sort of said is in some of the other industry is that we need a code of practice to get people to handle this information, because as a construction group and a construction industry, I've got a bit of sympathy for architects, building services engineers, fire engineers, and suppliers and contractors. And I mean, if you look at, we've had another big one that's gone bust recently, haven't we? A big contractor that's gone as well. I forget the name. It wasn't Hill Group. It was a different one. It's just like the endless revolving churn of internal big building contractors that are going under, and it's all going to be in relation to getting wrong products in wrong walls and refitting out and fighting legal cases over it. So we've got to get to the point where the top understands what they're doing and how they get there. The bottom understands how to verify the adequacy of what they've been asked to install. And the likes of the big contractors in the middle have got a mechanism to kind of help that information get passed around, because I don't think there's one key knowledge holder for any subject, because every subject's going to intertwine at the support and construction it kind of meets at. So you've got to have a method of doing it. Do you know what I mean? There's like 7 types of frame types for dampers, and you've got to have a way of installing them. You need access. Someone's got to do the seal both sides. You've got breakaway joints, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's all different. Things like this one is not out yet, but I'll just show you this quickly as well, because it makes it a bit easier to see. If you take things like what's it gone? Hold on. This is my fabulous computer. If you take things like smoke control systems, right, or even fire resistant ducts, you've not got a fire damper at each wall. You've got something that transits through the whole area of the building, if that makes sense. So you might have a system here, which could be a kitchen extract. It's 1 hour. So you do a 1 hour detail at that wall, but this room's got a 2 hour protected space. That detail on the outside fire, because it's a type A we've got to protect against in here, is going to trump the type AB test there. That's going to be a different thickness of insulation to that room. The wall's got to be the same as the 2 hour wall that's been used for the testing all the way through. See what we're trying to do? We're trying to give people an easy way to do it. But the big problem with all of these things that we've got, and I think this is where a lot of this information George has got, Richard, anyway. But when you start looking at things like, I can bring this up on the screen quickly. Things like smoke control dampers, right? And it's that's basically the BIM information you need for one damper in a wall, smoke control damper in a wall. Not just the EIS. You've got to look at what value of what do you want? What period do you want? Is it automatic? Is it manual intervention? Is it manual intervention only without any sort of switching, which is basically controlled intervention? Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it in the wall? What's the wall thickness? What's the floor thickness? Is it duct mounted? What pressure is it tested at? Is it inside to outside or both directions? Is it C300, 1000, C-mod? What blade types have you got? Is it single? You've got to get all of this stuff recorded, because it has an effect on the life safety critical nature of the product. You can't take an opposed blade out and change it with single blade. You screwed your golden thread already. See how complicated it kind of is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not just as simple. This is why when me and George spoke at length about this, and not quoting George, because you probably look at this video and go, he's quoting me left, right, and centre. I'm sorry, George, but the bottom line is that you try and get all this stuff in a template of a BIM. Someone's got to pay and get all this language into a machine readable way where we can kind of agree it. Because even the cause and effect of it is important, because some are going to cause and effect open, some are going to cause and effect close. And you've got to record it at each location what its function was originally. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot to it. And this is important because it's about authority of control. All of this, it's about how you control airflow rates from digital signals. So it's not just as simple as, you know, EIR and the rest of it. If you look at the BIM coordinated sheet in its fullest, we've seen this before. This is probably really mind blowing, but it just to give you this will take a second because it's a bit of a nightmare file.
Well, Andrew had his hand up. You
oh,
can't
sorry, I can't
obviously.
see it. No, I can't.
No. That's what I'm saying.
Whoever's got their hand up, speak now.
Yes, hi, it's Andrew.
Sorry, Andrew.
What comes across to me, not looking on a technical point of view, particularly just an overview, is that at the moment we're looking at products the way they're currently designed, but perhaps because we know it's complicated, maybe there'll be a case where product design will change to allow more flexibility so that less errors are going to occur, rather than us trying to work out how to get this very complicated version in and making sure it's right, because it has to be very specific, and how much more it will drive change in design, so that it makes our life easier, you know, when you're trying to pick something.
Yeah, I think Andrew, it's a big point, right? Because I mean, because you're working for it's the ch.org, isn't it? What's the ch.org?
Yeah, THCH.
Okay.
Yeah, Tower Hamlets Community Housing. Yeah, housing.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I forgot because I used to deal with Mike Smith and all the guys over the years ago, but I think they're all retired now, actually. From Charles. So yeah, so I mean, look, I mean, from your point of view, I think the hard bit is that if you're looking after a community asset like a housing estates, you look at BIM, you're probably 3 or 4 years away before all this stuff can get sucked into such a way you've got assets that you can look at and you can pull it all out and go, actually, just give me one of these to replace that.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I mean, we do simplify. I mean, what tends to happen is, for instance, a builder who's going, blimey, it's complicated to build a high rise now. All right, then we won't build a high rise. Let's build 2 low rises. I mean, we make it simpler, because you know, it's achievable, rather than going, let's make it complicated. So yeah, let's take all that complicated stuff out and put a simple thing in.
Yeah,
you know, so there are ways around it, rather than trying to say, how are we going to manage all this data? It's like, easy, don't have all the data because we have simpler stuff, you know, because everyone's happier with it. Like, oh, how are we going to manage the, you know, how the different fixing methods for this type of cladding on the wall, and you know, if we ever change the fixing screws, are we sure? It's like, or just don't put the cladding on, you know, and we simplify it that way.
Well, do you know the interesting thing? The only thing that this rule set doesn't apply to cladding. That's the interesting one, you know. And I've got to think about the best way to display. I've got cider eyes on in the background, trying to give me a bit of help on how to sort of display it. But for any product that penetrates an internal wall, the same kind of process applies. And I think it doesn't matter how tall or small you go, this problem isn't going to kind of go away, because when you look at risk categories of space, and I think if you look from residential, you've got either push-pull systems in corridors, or you might have natural ventilation systems for smoke control in corridors, but there's still a product range that comes with it under smoke control, which is a product range you can't not avoid. So those kind of questions, I think you're right. A lot of the builders go, it's getting more complicated because, you know, we might need 2 staircases rather than one. You say, we'll shrink them down then, but you go, like, just not to be wrong here, is that if you've got 1 staircase or 2, if you've got an ill-designed smoke control system, it wouldn't matter if you had 3. Does it make sense?
Quite. I mean, yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah.
I just think I'm not sure it's going to make anything safer by having 2 if the other things around it are wrong. Does it make sense? You've got to get that balance right between getting. So I think you're right what you're saying. I've totally agree with Andrew. Is that how we give that information to you for your level? You won't be interested in this. You just want to see really a sheet that says this is all the key attributes to that product that was installed. If I want to replace it, I just want one of them to replace that.
Yeah,
and that's the bit we're trying to get to, where you kind of have a technical sheet that says, give me that number for that location. That's all I want. And the wall type is this, and it's been recorded because you've got it done by summation, just to supply it to me. Because otherwise you can't, you know, do the next part of it.
Yeah.
Jane, so we did sort of display this because, you know, when you look at the top, we've got to get this kind of bit to work better. And some of that is, I think, early contractor engagement, I think, from that Digital Construction Week is really important. But I think it's only going to work if we give the right platform. I think, Steve, you'll agree with this, give the right platform. Hopefully you're going to save me, Steve. The right platform for those specialists that get brought in to look at it and go, how do we display the data in the first instance of what you want to see? And actually, do we know all the attributes of the risk classes of the spaces? Can you give it to? And everyone's then talking in the same language, because at the moment, I think you said it yourself there, Andrew, I don't think everybody is talking in the same language. That's part of the issue that I'm seeing. You know, the education between all the different disciplines isn't completely aligned. Do you know what I mean? It makes sense.
Yeah. But also no one can, it's very hard for anyone, you know, it's like you speak to a builder, they hardly understand what a fire alarm is, never mind, you know, or how a damper is. Everyone is specialist in their area and relies on other specialists to fill in the gap. So as you say, an architect designed a building and says, right, Mr. Fred, can you tell us what I need to put in here? Or what type, I want to put a thing in here. Can you tell me what is the best product? And then they say, you want to fit one of these. But what you said about it being phased, I don't think it is phased. I think as much as possible, everything needs to be designed very much up front so that the regulator can check that everyone's bit of their own kit works with everyone else's bit of kit, which is what you've been saying, you know, and so that the changes don't change too late, and then it's too late to do anything about it because the wall's already been built and it's the wrong type of wall. So the idea is to get it all done up front and check that everyone else is happy with everything else, that no one's interfering with someone else's kit, as you say, which is exactly what you're pointing out here, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it has to be done with everyone in the room almost, saying, yeah, if I change this, that'll be fine. But no one, I think the problem is trying to expect everyone to understand everything just is never going to happen.
No, it's not. That's why I think simple diagrammatics make it a bit easier for people to visualize. Because I mean, look, even no respect to the regulators. I mean, when we did some of the original consultations with Cantor, you know, they were talking about the skill in building control, and we sort of said, you know, look, I'm not being funny, but the guys I used to do with Mike Smith, Eamon Gunn, Stuart Sanford, John Cromwell, I don't know if he's still around either over there, but they were, you know, getting on in the late 90s, early 2000s. We're now in 2024. That skill gap's huge, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So the knowledge probably isn't there around all of these product changes, which essentially kicked in with CPR 2013. The knowledge just isn't there. So I think, you know, the two entrapments I've always seen is that you design a structural building, you put all the steel beams closer to the compartment lines because it's easier for drift and, you know, torsion and the rest of it in shear. But actually, it doesn't work for compartmentation. So it's inherently flawed because nothing can go through it. So these are the bits that worried me, and I've said it openly initially. So if you don't pick that up at the design stage, because the design doesn't understand products, and the regulators go, well, we've seen enough information on your structure at Gateway 2 and, you know, your piling. You've missed the boat already. It's game over because you're then stuck with it. The bit you're trying to prevent, and so am I, is actually missing the point on that part there. You know, and the other thing is around things like horizontal compartmentation, because especially in, you know, and this all goes back, and this is credit to Tower Hamlets Building Control at the time, just to make you smile, really. It's we used to talk about the scenario with risers running through buildings in the vertical plane, and forgetting that you've got to put temporary ones in there as you go through, which is a bit of a minefield. Is that if you go from a below ground risk or a different user risk and the riser's connected up the building, the problem is you have two people in the riser at one time, you just breach the whole compartmentation. So we always used to go through those scenarios to make sure that the horizontals are in the right place. That's something that doesn't tend to go on, and you end up, people put riser safe systems in where they should be compartmented, and because they've not realised they're compartmented, to get all the stuff in it, the riser's 50% too small because all the sills need certain spaces to get them in. So I think those kind of entrapments, I think, are still going to exist, but that's the thing we see at the moment anyway. So I'm not sure if that's going to get, this is just my head spaces, I'm not sure that's going to get picked up by a regulator, because no one's picking it up at the moment, you know, because it's one of the complications of it. I'm not sure the regulator's going to understand all of this just yet. I think it's going to take them a period of time to catch up as well. If that makes sense, I think it's just going to, we need to help educate everyone, top, bottom, and the bottom of all of this as well. But I think my biggest concern was the reliance on BIM to pick up all of it is probably wrong, because to get the templators right is a bit of time off, because we've got to agree all the, as George was saying, the ontology of each subject to get it into a templator. That makes sense. That was probably my piece for one day. I'm not going to display too much more because it will just probably maybe bore the life out of you. And unfortunately, I've got a client meeting just over an hour I've got to prepare for as well, which doesn't help. So I do apologise. Wasn't planned, unfortunately. But one of those things you get called into. You can't always stop that pull, can you? But is anyone else on the call got any questions? Claire, Alistair, Jan?
I think it's kind of clear, but also bamboozled at the same time with the quantity of information that's going to have to be put together on this. You say, I don't think everybody fully understands everything.
No. I mean, we've had I've had conversations about this, in the business, saying, look, you're heading for digital records, but there's no good just having a record of what's installed if you don't know if it was appropriate in the first place for the combination of all the components and the wall being, ample in its own state, not like sliced up like a Swiss cheese. Because the most annoying thing is when you get bent out of shape, you go around sites, you see bits of board re-screwed here and bits of board re-screwed there, and you go, that's just how they build that in practice in the furnace, isn't it? And they go, no, so it's not representative. You can end up creating more problems if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So it is complicated. I see you looking at the screen, Paul. You got any massive thoughts on this? Because I know obviously you're working at Langer Hall, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Paul. That was a really good presentation, I thought. I'm quite mind-boggling, really. Just listening to you and going through it, I was struck by the complexity of the whole subject.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing I deal with day in and day out. Problems to do with, well, a lot of aspects of stuff that you covered in your presentation. But what I was going to say is, I think I saw some of the points in response to those questions were about the complexity of the whole system, the current system, and I don't, and like there are sort of efforts at the moment to I suppose get around there, get some solution to that, which are all admirable, commendable, and probably the right thing, because that's the direction of building construction and technology and regulation and requirements. I mean, it's unavoidable. I think it's going to go down that route where we're going to just have an accumulation of data of all sorts that is going to be required. I mean, that is probably eventually how it's going to be resolved. But you kind of reminded me how complex the whole subject is, the topic, because I'm from an architectural background, and then I've sort of gone into construction, BIM and construction, maybe for the past 10 years or so. I remember a few years back, when I was still in architecture, when building control, when the building control organization sort of regarding fire was, say it was getting complicated already at the time. This was maybe like 10, 15 years ago. And they were sort of changing their approach to the fire regs, Part B related, to be a more holistic approach, because there were so many sort of little regulations regarding escape routes, fire compartmentization, sprinkler systems, smoke extraction systems, all sorts, escape route materials. It's a lot of the stuff that you mentioned and they were saying that it was better to have a holistic strategy for fire rather than sort of just have your first, that's your built form. How are you gonna make it fire safe? This is sort of start from thinking about a sensible approach, at strategic level of design. So I think that's something to be looked at seriously, and with the history of the past sort of 10, 15, 20 years, seeing that really does need to be considered, as well as the stuff that George has been doing with the golden thread, and the development of technology, which all of these things will contribute to the solution. But as you've brought up, the looking at it holistically, while might sound like a great idea, I mean, this is talking about not just fire stopping, which the rules around those things are changing all the time anyway. But like you mentioned, fire doors, windows, openings, materials, floor junctions, wall interfaces, materials of all sorts, and various solutions, AOVs, etc. It's complicated. It's going to be a tricky one to navigate. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling on a bit.
No,
here.
no, you're not. No, you're
But,
not. No, I'm just taking it all in.
So from my perspective, I mean, we're struggling. When it's already a struggle just to get a schedule of all the passive fire stopping on a project. I mean, I'm at the moment having to go through 5,000 lines of data for our fire stops. It to achieve a holistic, good quality piece of information that's going to be of use, years down the line, as the assets in operation. It's almost like it's the holy grail, isn't it? But we're sort of very early on in that challenge, I'd say. Just to add to that, this will be my last point.
That's all right.
The number of specialists involved, it's only increasing. Is not in any way sort of simplifying or becoming more straightforward. It's becoming harder and more complex. So it's not only with the MEP designers, subcontractors, specialists. I mean, we've got separate specialists in ventilation, electrics, security, smoke detection, as well as sort of structures, architects, specialist designers, interiors, etc. These have all got to coordinate and contribute to this process. I don't see how it's I don't see how they can avoid it.
No, you can't. You look, Paul, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, if you look, I mean, the opener for me, right, was when I started. When I did. First of all, I did a process for how I think designers should behave, like a codem, right? And I've done that. And I've been through external with it. We've got to a point about how you handle information. Doesn't how to make it right, but how you should behave around passive fire, right? Then I did the process around dampers to reflect it, and that kind of works. Then I did some stuff on pipe work, because I wanted to just verify pipe work from what I know from the test standards, because I always suspected pipe work would be harder than fire dampers, and everyone was like, no, it won't be, mate. I'll let it bear quickly, right? Because I think when you look at things like fire doors and the rest of it, we all think they're going to be the most complicated ones. When you look at Has it gone to the right screen? Or hasn't done anything, has it? Oh, it has, yes. When you look at pipework, this is laying it bare, right? If you go, if that's the same material all the way through that wall, both sides, for the whole connection through there, then
Yeah.
that would be a CC connection, right? Tested CC, closed. If I've got a joint within 500 of that wall, that's classed as UC. But the joint, that's if it's not welded, or if it's not like metal flanged, if it's like crimped, push fit, it's classed as UC. You got to test it at one end open, the other end closed. If you've got a change in material from, say, steel to plastics, that's probably a UC connection as well. That makes sense? Right, then you've got to look at the fact that, do you have an insulation on these pipes for thermal conductivity issues like LTHW or chilled or rainwater? Because if you have, that still then needs to be continuously sustained. And what I'm saying is, when you start looking at the number you need to classify pipework against, it's actually that, not is it combustible, non-combustible in a period of time, and an AI rating, resistance period, should I say. It's a bit more complicated than just that number, because the supports, the fixings, the access is still from both sides, right? And everyone goes, oh, we can do it from one side, and you go, how do you maintain the vapor seal? How do you prove it the other side? How do you record it? How do you get in there to do it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we're actually not. And the problem indicated earlier is that what we're doing is, and this, I haven't verified this yet with external peers, but the problem is we're not actually, we're boxing ourselves into a corner on jobs rather than going, I'm sorry, I simply cannot make that work. Not just from an installation point of view, but for future maintenance, for checking seals, for access, because I've seen stuff going rises like ventilation where you've got fire dampers and they go, no, you've got no access into it after. And I go, there's not enough space to, verify the seal or install it. I'll do the breakaway joints. And actually, I can't get in there for future to maintain stuff. It's not right. It's wrong. Do you know what I mean? So these kind of diagrams help people have that fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is what's kind of been missing for all of these different subjects. And just to say, you look at the system as a whole, what variances have you got in it? Because you've got UC, CU, CU, CC, UU, so all those other things that come into it, CL, all the different types of insulation you can have, depending on whether you're continuous, or, insulated or locally continuous, it doesn't go through the wall, or if it's locally sustained or locally either side, which is these diagrams here. Well, what is it we want? What is it that's appropriate to the function of the pipe originally? Part B comes later. See where I'm getting from? It's just looking at it in a slightly different way. That makes sense. Do you know what I mean? But I'm rambling now as well, so I'll stop sharing. But yeah, we've all suspected it's complicated, and the answer is it is. But I think, as Andrew says, it'll if you're doing what you're doing, I'm not speaking for you, Andrew. You need it delivered in a certain way for future. And if I'm doing what I'm doing, I need a way to control the band, conduct it. And if you're doing BIM, you've got your work cut out, because they're all interested in clashes, but you try and identify a clash in a rule set, because the bottom line is you can't have rule sets around pipe work, because depending on the CL, the CI, the jointing type and the rest of it, in the size of the pipe and the bore thickness comes into it as well, it just affects the rule set. It's got to be specific to the condition for which you're doing. So if you're doing builders work for this kind of stuff, the worst thing you can do is put it all on the same schedule. You've got to have individual ones for product standards. Then you get the risk category of space and how you put that thing to practice. Then you can compare it against the walls. Because it's a slightly different way, because you mix it all up, jumble it all up. You don't know the wood for the trees, do you?
Right.
Oh, well, listen, I've got to shoot off, Richard. Unfortunately, I don't know if Richard's shot off himself actually, but I've got to go. Has anyone else got any more questions or anything?
I mean, it's all valid points, and
Yeah.
Obviously I'm telling you to suck eggs on here.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, it's got to have a strong lead designer on the project to be engaged by the client early. We've been on about this for tens of years now, rather than be led by individuals who wear a badge that focus on just cost and program, and then say, well, we've got the design team. It's their bag. They can get on with it, but they've got a price to within a certain price. That's got to all change with this traditional approach that we've been subjected against on massive developments in London. Has got to change very radically. That the client needs to engage the team earlier, as we've all been saying, with the right specialisms. And they need to, as you've raised many times, and we all know this term RACI, who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to consult, he needs to be thought through before we crack on. And it's breaking those elements down, the mechanical, electrical, fire, the building products you mentioned, let alone we've not mentioned on this, not to do with this, is the structural aspects. They're the key things that need to be broken down into work streams and having what we call swimming lanes across. So it needs to be directed in order that you guys who are absolutely spot on with your technical knowledge can contribute to make this effective on every project we're employed on. Very much so. And as you've been saying, it's about design up front. Everything's got to be, that's more or less it's saying the design phase. They've changed rightly the terminology from CDM, not pre-construction. They've stated design phase, and the design phase should be early, as we all know. And unfortunately, the regulator doesn't understand the industry and what you guys and what everyone's trying to do out there. So there's a lot of education required here with clients about their procurement, and also bringing in who's going to manage their asset. We've been saying for so long. On that. I mean, you've got this accountable person, for high risk buildings that's got to conjure up the safety case report out of nowhere, more or less, when they should be involved with this, because they're going to inherit everything. And they've seemed to have missed the plot on that.
No, they have completely missed the plot.
Yeah. So there's some very much, I think, bespoke in systems and processes by being involved early and helping write the contract. Basically, because unless it's in the contract, it's firefighting. So I'm sorry, but that's from what I've seen so far and experienced, where the solutions are required going forward to make this happen in reality.
Okay, Paul, if you need to get away, mate.
I
no
do actually. I do apologise, everyone. I'm sorry about the start there.
No, thank you very much for doing it, mate.
Because I know we haven't run this one for a while fully, but I think there's been so much going on. I think in everyone's agenda at the moment, all the regulator. I think we will start running these in a bit more of a constructive manner. I think what I'll do as well, because I sit on other things, I've got information I need to sort of try and get out to you and how things are displayed. And I think if you look at those diagrams, how they're displayed, it makes it a bit easier to interpret, I think, what you're looking at just diagrammatically. Hopefully you'll agree with that. I think Claire put a comment on there earlier, basically saying that it's mind-boggling for me, as with Andrew, as the end user client will be looking for the output, but it's important to have an informed overview of how the golden thread can be held together. So there is a way to hold the golden thread for how you get to selection, but I'm saying you can't do it in BIM at the moment. At the moment, I'm doing it in Excel, and it's hence the reason I have individual schedules for builders work, Paul. But on that bombshell, I need to go. But have a nice day, everyone. Good to see you all again, and I'll see you at the next one. Okay. Cheers, Richard.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Has anybody else got anything they want to share on this? No. Well, if not,
here's a thing, Richard. Right?
Yeah.
It's complicated, right? No one's mentioned it yet, but with the growing thing of AI, maybe at some point we can get all this complication managed in 3D, but with AI trying to point us in the right direction. Completely off the chart yet, but when things get very complicated, either you're going to make it simple or you're going to have a system that understands complications.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's certainly heading that way, in that direction. I think it's heading there very quickly.
Yeah,
very quickly.
Because that could work. Because it could say,
well,
hang on, this is a clash.
We've only seen a fraction of what's actually going on, obviously. So it's the tip of the iceberg. So I mean, the very nature of the beast is that it happens quickly because it learns.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that's the whole
Throw
point
enough
about
stuff
it.
in
If it doesn't learn itself, then it isn't AI.
Yeah, quite. But that's a whole how you can keep that control and double check that what it's coming up with as answers is right.
This is it. That's fine until that's fine until there's a glitch.
Yeah, and then you go, well, who's actually responsible?
Yeah,
Because who wrote it? Because the AI isn't really responsible. It's just giving an opinion. If it's wrong, it's everyone just trusts it. It must be right. But we've all done Google searches and come up with completely the wrong thing.
Yeah,
and going, no, you've missed the point completely. But if it came up with a solution in as a drawing, you may be able to then read that drawing and go, yes, I understand it that way. You can't do it this way, or that's a clever way. But the thing is, I find I work with a lot of builders, I work with maintenance people who are specialists in what they do, apparently, and I'm constantly catching them out, and that's basic stuff. How's really complicated stuff? I can't get a builder who's built loads of properties before to put the right fire system in sometimes, and that's really basic. Now we're doing really complicated stuff. They don't know. They just get their mate Fred who puts fire alarms in, and he doesn't half know. So you can't just write a sheet and go, oh, everyone will follow this. It's not going to happen.
I've long said,
I think it has to be simpler.
If you want to get anything done properly, it doesn't matter who it is you're dealing with. It could be a government department, it could be in a bloody shop, it can be anywhere. You have got to have a knowledge of the other person's job, because otherwise you haven't got a cat's chance in hell. Because you've got to know the right questions to ask. If you haven't got a bit of a knowledge about what they're doing and how they do it, you're not going to ask the right questions, and it shouldn't be like that, but it is.
Yeah,
and I think what you're saying is a prime example.
You have to challenge them with the right questions.
This is where AI could maybe be good, though, Andrew, because it's very good at pulling in massive amounts of data from disparate, adjacent areas and pulling it together and making sense of it. So it could be with construction. I mean, all the complications we've been talking about with Paul just now, it could be that it does actually work quite well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. But you need someone who knows that area to sort of put the data into AI.
That's it. You see, it's rubbish in, rubbish out, isn't it? Has anybody else got anything? Any other comments?
The only thing I was going to add is that the HSE are actually running weekly workshops on Q&A for building safety, which if you want to talk to them directly, that is a very good avenue.
Oh, how do we find out about that?
Have you got a link to that at all, Jan?
The only thing I can give you is the woman's email. I think they're trying to get as many people involved as possible.
Is it on the Gov website?
Make a note of. Can you put that in the chat, Jan? Is it Jan or Jan?
It's Jan, but everyone keeps getting it wrong.
Could you put it in the chat, put something in the chat, and then Jess will pick that up and follow up with it? That'd be very good. We'll put it on out on LinkedIn and stuff, because that's horse's mouth, really, isn't it?
Yeah, nice way. Yeah, I'm literally writing building safety case now, so any guidance is always good.
Have you referred to the government consultation documents?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the best place to start, I think.
Yeah, but everything's changing. New advice everywhere, isn't it? You say weekly advice.
They've changed there was something called design and access, design and build statement. That's going to change in terms of the name of it. I know that much. And now the only other thing I did want to mention was that someone says it's not in the BIM, as though it's just a 3D model, but BIM isn't a 3D model. BIM is
absolute
data.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we've been For a couple of years now in BIM4Housing, we've been very much emphasising it's not building information modelling; it's better information management.
That's a good one.
So I'll see if I can find. What I'll do is I'll try and find the email that I got about the.
That would be
work.
great, mate. While you're doing that, let me just say, anybody, we're holding, in case you haven't seen, we've got 12 online roundtable events, tail end of June, to look at all our fire critical asset guidance. We published it a couple of years ago. We're now sort of like reviewing it in line with the Fire Safety and Building Safety Acts. So just, you want to put that, a link to the form, the tick box form in the chat.
Yeah.
If any of you want to come along to any of those, have a look at the dates and times and stuff. And then you can tick a box and we'll send you out invitations for whichever ones you want to do. But just to put that in the chat, hopefully you can all come along to one or more and help us get that work done. We've got a very good attendance coming at the moment. Should be good stuff.
I'll paste this email. Just. Sorry.
No worries, it's great.
Spell.
Got it. Excellent. So just you pick up on that, Jenny Hagan.
Yep.
And we'll get something off to her. Very good. And so we'll put that in over LinkedIn and stuff as well.
Yeah, that'll clear up a lot of the questions, because a lot of this chat today was about how complicated it is to design, but that isn't going to be their role to check that.
Sure. Yeah. No, very, very good. And just as put the link in for the tick box to say what fire safety roundtables you want to come along to. So have a look at that, everyone, if you can. Okay, then. So I suggest, unless anything's got anything they want to say, let's wrap up a bit early, shall we?
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
All right. Good to see you. See you
Cheers.
soon.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Richard.
guys.
Cheers all.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes.